So, Friday, April 5th, 2002, I wake up in Wilmington, North Carolina. I get on the road. Adrian gave me a ride out, dropped me off. And first a guy named Lewis gave me a ride. And Lewis was a pretty cool older guy. Forget what he did, but only thing I remember about Lewis was he used to be a golfer. He said he'd hated golf because sometimes you'd have really good games and then other times you'd have really bad games. And one day he just threw his clubs in the water, just at some golf, golf course. If I ever went there, his clubs were in the fifth hole. But so he drops me off. He drops me off on 95. So my big plan for this trip for the next week is to go from Wilmington, North Carolina, all the way to Seattle. And also kind of like do a roundabout way to hit a bunch of states I hadn't been to, including Florida, including Georgia, including South Carolina. That's why I was going south on 95 instead of going just directly west. So I get to 95 and I get picked up by a guy named Rob. I think it's Rob McClain. Rob McClain picks me up. First things first, he's got a 12-pack of beer just sitting in between us in the truck. I'm pretty sure Rob didn't have seatbelts either. And so we're driving down the 95, and I'm a little worried because he's, drinking. So I decide to drink as many beers as possible so he won't be able to drink them. And so I'm just pounding Budweisers. And eventually we get into Georgia and he just stops and buys another six-pack, so it doesn't really matter. But I remember we're driving. I remember number one, I think it was Georgia, the cops had Camaros, which at the time I thought was like the coolest thing ever, No, Angel, they were not mini beers, but it's funny that because those mini beers had just gotten popular at the time, and eventually I did have some adventures with the mini beers. But so me and Rob are driving, and I remember we get stuck on the 95. All of a sudden traffic just stops. And we're kind of tooling along slow, and eventually we get up to this point and we look over and there's a car accident. A car from our lane had driven across the medium, which was a good 100 feet, 50 feet, bam, ran into this other car, and you could just tell that people had died. This was bad. Nobody had survived this crash, dead for sure. And of course, as soon as we got out of that traffic, Ron just hits it. He just starts driving, and he's going a good his speedometer doesn't work, by the way, and he's got to be going 90 miles per hour. And so the thing with Ron is Ron had a girlfriend who lived down in Jacksonville, and he worked up somewhere in North Carolina. And every Thursday night, he'd fix up his truck, he'd rebuild the engine. And after he gets done rebuilding the engine, Friday after work, he'd drive down to Jacksonville to see his girlfriend. She had a cushy job. She'd rent him a hotel room. And so we're driving, and, we get into Georgia. We're drinking more. I think he had a little dope, too. We might have got a little stoned, or maybe I was the one with a little bit of weed. And we end up getting into, we get into Jacksonville. And we get into Jacksonville, and it's getting dark. And every time we get to a stop sign, the car is kind of starting to shimmy. And Ron's like, oh, he's like, you know what? He's like, I bet when my buddy put together the belt on, he put it on backwards. He's like, if I stop this car, the car's gonna stop. He's like, and that's it. We're not gonna be running anymore. So he says, you know what? We're gonna get more energy if we turn the lights off. So we're driving through Jacksonville at night, no lights on, running stop signs, running stop lights, and he's just doing no speedometer. We're both drinking beers, and he's just laughing the whole time, no seat belts either. And eventually, by the grace of God, we make it to this hotel, and as soon as we stop, the car seizes up, and it doesn't turn back over, and he's like, that's it. He's like, it's done for. And I get out, and I start walking down the freeway, and I walk a couple miles, and it's late at night, and I think I actually see an alligator in the subway, or in the little side thing on the side of the road. I'm not sure, something was moving around, but I'm gonna pretend it was an alligator. And I end up getting this convenience store, and I meet a guy named Raul, and Raul thinks it's cool that I'm doing something with my life, hitchhiking around the country. and he offers to give me a ride. But it was funny because he kept asking me, he's like, "You're not going to kill me? I just had a baby. You're not going to kill me, are you?" So Raul, by the way, had just came to America 5 years before, and he already owned a gas station. He's doing very well in life. You know, that's the American dream right there. And so eventually he got off work after about an hour, and I think he also gave me a giant bottle of water. Thank you, Raul. And he gave me a ride somewhere along the, I think it was along the 10, and he dropped me off, and I fell asleep on the side of the road and woke up the next morning. So Saturday was cool. I got picked up by a guy named Jack, who I don't remember anything about. Then I got picked up by a guy named Joe, who at the time my email was slick24_@Hotmail, and his was slickdaddy1@Hotmail. What are the chances? He thought it was really cool. But what was cool was Joe took me to a place called Suwannee Springs. Suwannee Springs was this it was these natural springs in Live Oak, Florida, and the water was actually red from the I guess he said it was from the roots of the trees. The water was red, and there was this old Spanish fort that was almost gone, but there were still some walls, and there was this giant thing you could go into. It was pretty cool. It was definitely one of those things I never would have saw on my own. And eventually he dropped me off, and then a guy named Mark picked me up. Actually, no. Elmo and Theo then picked me up. Two young women, probably my age, early 20s. And I think they were a couple, and they gave me a ride for a couple hours, and it was pretty nice. And then a guy named Mark with his kid, he was driving up, and we drove through Atlanta, which at the time, as we were driving through Atlanta, the song "Welcome to Atlanta" by whatever that awful guy's name is came on, and I thought that was pretty cool. And eventually he dropped me off on the Georgia Tennessee border, and I was at and I walked all the way back through the woods and slept for the night. So that was Friday and Saturday of 2002, April 5th and 6th. So tune back in later for more stories from the road.